It's been more than 15 years since the attacks of September 11, 2001, so it's easy to understand why many Americans have forgotten the level of hysteria that gripped the nation in the days following the downing of the World Trade Center. But there's one group that hasn't forgotten: the hundreds of immigrants, mostly Muslims, who were swept up and held at the Metropolitan Detention Center in Brooklyn on immigration violations and, they say, subjected to beatings, humiliating searches, and other abuses. Their story is back in the news today because the Supreme Court has agreed to hear a civil case brought by some of these detainees against high-ranking George W. Bush administration officials, including former Attorney General John Ashcroft and former FBI Director Robert S. Mueller. The unlawful roundups were criticized at the time by their Inspector General of the Justice Department, who in 2003 issued reports saying that the government had made little or no effort to distinguish between actual suspects and Muslim immigrants with minor visa violations. In letting the case against the Bush officials proceed, the appeals court judges wrote that, quote, holding individuals in solitary confinement 23 hours a day with regular strip searches because their perceived faith or race placed them in the group targeted for recruitment by Al-Qaeda violated the detainees' constitutional rights. So now the Supreme Court will have to decide whether top-level administration officials can be held liable for illegal practices that took place on their watch. Even though it seems like a simple idea, it's a no-brainer that those in positions of authority should be held accountable for illegal actions taken by their underlings. That has been far from the case when it comes to any 9/11 related charges. You guys remember the torture that went on at Abu Ghraib? Was anyone in the Bush administration held liable? Maybe like the Secretary of Defense Don Rumsfeld, Vice President Cheney, anyone? No. But Specialist Lindy England went to prison for 3 years because she no doubt masterminded the whole thing, right? But that has been the pattern since 9/11 for all of those at the top who lied to us to get us into this illegal, devastating war and then oversaw the rampant abuse, torture, and extrajudicial killing that's taken place ever since. No consequences. The only ones who pay a price are the low-level fall guys like Lindy England, or worse, the whistleblowers like Chelsea Manning who had the audacity to bring attention to those abusers. To date, the only official to be prosecuted and imprisoned for any reason relating to the CIA torture is John Kirkow, the guy who revealed the truth about the CIA's waterboarding program. And don't forget, while the FBI responded to the September 11 attacks by rounding up a bunch of Muslims on minor immigration violations, the Bush administration was also busy rounding up other Muslims. Specifically, the 24 members of Osama bin Laden's extended family the Bush administration helped spirit out of the United States. What a weird duality. So with this case now headed to the Supreme Court, there is an opportunity. However small, in 15 years after the fact, there is still an opportunity to hold someone in a position of power accountable for breaking the law. And bear in mind, this is a civil and not a criminal case. So even if the plaintiffs win, no one's going to jail. In dissenting with the decision to allow this case to proceed, Judge Rena Raggi said that Ashcroft and Mueller should not be held liable for, quote, policies propounded to safeguard the nation in the immediate aftermath of the infamous Al-Qaeda terrorist attacks. She also added that, quote, it is difficult to imagine a public good more demanding of decisiveness or more tolerant of reasonable, even if mistaken, judgments than the protection of this nation and its people from further terrorist attacks. So basically, if you claim national defense as an excuse, you can go ahead and break the law. It's the same principle behind the stand your ground laws. Except in this case, I was so afraid I killed this unarmed black person who rang my doorbell because we were afraid, so we had to torture a bunch of Muslims. And they're both ridiculous. What's really ironic is whenever it's time to cut social programs or otherwise stick it to the poor and powerless, we hear all of this talk about bringing back personal responsibility. This case against Ashcroft and Mueller reflects the tiniest slice of misdeeds and illegality that took place in the years following the September 11 attacks, but it would be refreshing, for once, just for once, to see the same demands for personal responsibility applied to those at the top. Maybe then we could finally begin to do more than pay lip service to the message that no one, and I mean no one, absolutely is above the law, and send the message to the nation's elites that they need to be concerned about facing consequences when they break the law, just like the rest of us. I'm Hassan Piker, and this is The Breakdown.